Hi, I'm Prabhu Sundaraman. I work as a software consultant at Durasoft. I want to spend a few minutes talking about how to communicate software architecture. A lot of times when we architect solutions, we try to represent them on paper before we getting into the actual work. And most of the times, we don't have a standard notation to do that. We usually draw rectangular boxes with arrow marks haphazardly going here and there that it becomes too difficult to comprehend. We don't have a standard notation to do that. Well, we have UML, but UML is more technical in my opinion, and it also fairly low level. Can be understood well by developers, but if you want to have a really high level view of your system, UML doesn't really do the job required. So what we usually do is we can use something like a C4 model. A C4 model is a good modeling tool for software architecture. The C's represent the context, containers, components, and classes. Let's understand this with an example. Say I want to build an application, a web application that users can use to view the time and date and the calendar of various time zones and cities, etc. You want to represent this you want to represent this architecture somehow. So let's take up this context diagram. Here is what we have. This is a fairly high level abstraction of the whole problem. We have the user who is an anonymous user trying to access the entire system which displays the Gregorian calendar. Now, a software context diagram or a software system context diagram that represents the first C gives a very high level abstraction of the problem. You want to drill down into the software system and show more things. Here we go. We have the container diagram. If you look at this container diagram, we notice that we have a container which is our web application that I may want to implement using Ruby on Rails. So we have a container which talks to the database. And I'm going to use the database to store the settings. Say I want to store the time zone information and various other information that I'm going to use from my web application and display it on the web. And my anonymous user accesses this web application which talks to the database. And this is a container diagram. It's one step down the software system. Now I want to get into this web application. Now I want to represent certain components. It's going to be a bit technical, and I can use this word component in various ways. And component, in fact, is a very overloaded, in fact, misused term in the industry. So, a component diagram for this example would be displaying the controller and domain classes that we have on Ruby on Rails. So, my person, who's an anonymous user, is going to access the application using HTTP, and the components in the application is going to be a root controller, which is a controller class that's going to serve the default calendar, and it's going to use the domain model settings, which talks to the database and gets the information. So this is a component diagram. So we started off with a simple application. We drew a context diagram that gave a high level view. We drilled down, created a container diagram that represented the parts of the system where we had a web application and a database. And you go inside the web application, we have the controllers, domain model talking to the database. Now you're slowly getting an idea about how the system looks. And the last one, if you want to use, is the class diagram. This is a regular UML class diagram that represents all the relationships and stuff like that. In my opinion, this is optional, and I want to keep it that way because when I'm architecting a solution, I'm not really interested in displaying the classes and the relationship. I think it can be postponed to a much later state once we start writing code. So how do we draw all these diagrams? You can use tools like Visio or draw.io. So I've used draw.io to draw these diagrams, and you get a HTML file which you can share them, you can convert it to an image and use it. So you have now a simple way to represent software architecture, the C4 model. One of the important things that you have to keep in mind is never go overboard on these diagrams. It's very important to use these notations, standard notations that communicates the essence of your software architecture. At the same time, don't go overboard. Just keep it simple, stupid. Thanks for being patient. You can mail me your questions on at prabhu.bits@gmail.com or follow me on Facebook here. Thank you.